夠法定人數嚇。
Good afternoon, members. We have already formed a quorum, so in accordance with our rules, I would like to elect a chairman, Andrew Leung, Mr. Cheng Wah Fong, Christopher Zhang. Do you accept any seconder? He is not yet a member. Mr. Charles Mock. I'd like to second the nomination. Mr. Christopher Zhang, do you accept the nomination? Yes, Mr. Chairman. Any other nominations? No. Then Mr. Christopher Zhang has been elected uncontested. Congratulations. Thank you for your support, members. I now call the meeting to order. I would like to ask you whether we want to have a deputy chairman. If there is no need for a deputy chair, then so be it, and then we will take up the agenda of the meeting. Mr. Dennis Kwok would like to join the Bills Committee. This morning we have received a letter from Mr. Dennis Kwok. His letter has already been tabled for your reference. Mr. Kwok's application was not made at the time when the Secretariat extended the invitation, and he missed the opportunity, not because he was out of town, and it was not because he was indisposed, and therefore in accordance with ROP 23B and ROP 23C, it's up to members of the Blues Committee to decide whether to accept his late membership application. Members have the duty to scrutinize bills, and I welcome Mr. Dennis Kwok's membership. No objection? Then I would like to welcome Mr. Dennis Kwok to our Bills Committee.
呢度開始啦，講到呢個先。
係啦，因為啲官員出咗之後，佢就會介紹一條條例草案啦，然後咧就可以邀請委員去問問題，咁問問題就政府方面回應啦，咁然後去到尾部咧就喺考慮下一次見團體嘅日子嗰啲。
好啊，咁今日。
I would like to welcome the public officers attending today's meeting. We'll get a briefing from the public officers, and then if we have questions from members, then the floor will be open to members' questions. From the Financial Services and the Treasury Bureau, we have Ms. Selina Yan, Deputy Secretary, Financial Services, and from the Securities and Futures Commission, we have Mr. Keith Lui, Executive Director, Supervision of Markets. Also from the SFC, we have Mr. Rico Leung, Senior Director, Supervision of Markets. And from the FSTB, we have Ms. Ada Chen, PAS Financial Services 2. Also from the Bureau, we have the Assistant Secretary, Financial Services 2-1, Mr. Billy Au. From the SFC, we have Ms. Thrifty Mukadem, Director of Supervision of Markets. Welcome. Ms. Yen, would you like to walk us through the bill? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, members. For today's meeting, we are here to scrutinize the Securities and Futures and Companies Legislation Uncertificated Securities Market Amendment Bill 2014. This is to facilitate the introduction of uncertificated securities regime. This will be a major step forward. In the past, we have spent a lot of time to consult and take on board the views of the market concerning the introduction of an uncertificated securities regime. We have also been keeping in close liaison with the stakeholders. For the bill before you, quite a lot of the provisions have been drafted in order to introduce a framework for the introduction of an uncertificated securities regime. We would like to tie in with the work of the Bills Committee. We hope that we can finish scrutinizing the bill as soon as possible. At this moment, I would like to defer to Mr. Leung from the SFC so as to brief us on the rationale of the bill as well as the specific provisions in the bill. Mr. Leung, please. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, members. I'll be spending 10 plus minutes to briefly walk through the proposals in the bill. I'll talk about the background, the legislative and regulatory framework, as well as the structure of the bill. First of all, a word on the background. Probably you are aware that for the companies ordinance, the requirement is that companies have to issue paper certificates. And when the shares have to be transferred, then there is the requirement of the use of paper instruments of transfer. And therefore, it is a paper-based securities market, though investors may not be coming into contact with the paper-based securities on a daily basis, but it is indeed a paper-based securities market. As Ms. Yen has said, we would like to introduce a framework so as to facilitate the future introduction of uncertificated securities regime. As to the benefits of introducing such a regime, well, currently it is a paper-based regime. When we introduce an uncertificated securities regime, then we can dispense with the paper issues, and then we can modernize our financial infrastructure, and we can enhance the overall efficiency. And then with this arrangement, it means that it will be easier for investors to take part in corporate governance. I will elaborate on this point later on. And thirdly, we want to be on a par with overseas markets. As of now, not all overseas markets have got an uncertificated securities regime, but then more and more markets are migrating to such a regime. By introducing one in Hong Kong, it means that we will be enhancing our linkage with other leading markets like mainland China, Australia, Japan, and the UK. For the bill, the major work is to amend two pieces of legislation: the Securities and Futures Ordinance, SFO, and the Companies Ordinance, CO. We would like to introduce relevant amendments so that the SFC may regulate the market. And then we hope that under the SFO we can add new provisions so as to empower the SFC to make subsidiary legislation to regulate the regime. The current CO still requires paper instrument of transfer and paper-based certificates. When a company takes part in the Uncertificated securities regime, then the need can be dispensed with. Other than the two major pieces of legislation, we have to make corresponding changes to other legislation like the stamp duty ordinance. Now a word about the statistics for share certificates, just to give you an idea about the current status. As at the 30th of April 2014, for paper-based certificates, there are altogether 22.5 million units. When you look at the value, well, in fact, the majority, in fact, 60% of the such certificates have been deposited with the central clearing and settlement system to the value of 13 trillion Hong Kong dollars. This is to facilitate the clearing and settlement after transfer. When we are ready, both in terms of the market and in terms of the legislation, first of all, these share certificates kept in the CCASS will, by phases, be converted into paperless forms, and then in future, the investors can choose between holding the securities in uncertificated forms or having them still in the paper form. I would like to talk about the benefits of having this arrangement, and we have said that we can, through this arrangement, enhance corporate governance. As to how we can achieve this aim, currently within the CCASS, when transaction is made, we ask the securities firms to hold the certificates. By having the uncertificated share regime, it means that they can still choose between two options. Either they ask the agents to hold the certificates on their behalf. So it's a matter of they own the beneficial interest rather than having legal ownership. In the scenario of having an uncertificated system, the CCASS will then be having two choices for the investors. For prescribed accounts, direct ownership is then possible. In other words, by doing so, in specified accounts, the names will be reflected in the directors' register, so they have the legal ownership, and then they will be members of the company. And then when they have to vote, when they have company information, it will then be much more facilitated. As I have said, we have said that in the beginning, for those in the Hong Kong SEC, we will be having the uncertificated shares. Outside, we can still have certificated shares. So for the initial period, there will be a dual system, having both the certificated and uncertificated shares. They will be in existence in parallel for a period of time. Since we're having a dual system, so for the register of members of listed companies, there will be a change. In the future, the members' register will be divided into two parts. First, members' register uncertificated shares, and it will be the duty of the Hong Kong SEC to carry out the recording. And then for the rest, it will be the members' registered certificated shares. So the two registers together will form the register of members.
And in the bill, we propose to amend the company's ordinance to redefine what constitutes the register of members of a participating company, and that is that there will be two registers. As for what information is to be kept, how is it going to be maintained, and what information will be made available for inspection, we are going to amend the SFO to enable the SFC to come up with new subsidiary legislation to provide for the details and arrangements as regards what should be kept and what should be made available for inspection. Let me now turn to the regulatory oversight. In the uncertificated securities market, the regulatory body will be the SFC, will exercise the power to make rules to regulate the market. I want to mention in particular the third point here. We have no direct oversight over the share registrar services. But in the future, if they participate in the uncertificated securities market, then they are playing a different role, and they are an important part of the whole system. So after the new regime is up and running, and if the share registrar services providers are part of this system, we're going to introduce new rules to regulate the operation of such services. Under the SFO and the CO, we are going to introduce some new terms. First, prescribed securities, which means listed companies in the Hong Kong X and also IPOs in the future. So we prescribe here this coverage of the uncertificated securities market. At present, it's only about shares. Warrants, ETF, and so on and so forth are not covered at the moment. We have 1,490 listed companies in Hong Kong. And it will not be prudent to cover the 1,490s in the uncertificated market at one go. So we have another term here, participating shares. And that is to say not all of them would be participating shares in the first instance, in the first phase. So there are participating shares which are prescribed securities and have actually been accepted into the uncertificated security system. And then fees and charges. We are going to amend Section 76 of the ordinance, because under that provision we regulate the fees and charges levied by the Hong Kong X. And now under this bill will be empowered, SFC will be empowered to regulate fees and charges in the uncertificated security system to be charged by the Hong Kong X in the future. Although we haven't finalized the fees and charges, we have already got some guiding principles about the fees and charges. For example, they should be reasonable for all parties concerned, and they should commensurate with the services provided, and they should be set at a level conducive to encouraging innovation and market development, and also contributing to the longer-term benefit of a paperless securities market. Turning to stamp duty, at present there's a $5 fixed duty on shares transfer with an instrument of transfer. In the future, the system is paperless, so there's no need to use any instrument of transfer. So the $5 fixed duty will no longer be chargeable. But there's a 0.1% of a vorum stamp duty. And this will not be affected by the bill. In the future, apart from shares transacted through the Hong Kong X, there are other transfers which have got nothing to do with share transfers. For example, inheritance of estate. So we set up a new stamping arrangement even when there's no instrument of transfer, the foreign stamp duty can still be charged. And now here I would like to briefly mention the structure of the bill in a number of areas. The first is the amendments to the SFO. It's in clauses 3 to 19 of the bill. We would cover a few items here. The operator is the Hong Kong SCC. It's a recognized clearinghouse under the current ordinance, and there are some regulatory requirements imposed. And if it's also a operator of the uncertificated security market system, we are going to need to amend the provisions to cover the new services to be provided by the operator. Second, we'd like to introduce new terms, for example, prescribed securities, uncertificated securities market system, and so on. And there will be certain general principles to be incorporated. When a company participates in an uncertificated security market, then there will be no need to use paper for transfer of shares. But the transfer must be carried out through the future uncertificated securities market system. Another point is to amend the SFO so that SFC can approve the operator of an uncertificated securities market system, and we can also revoke the approval. And there will also be the power to make subsidiary legislation by the SFC for regulatory and operational matters in the form of rules. We're also going to prescribe or provide for a new Schedule 3A to list the classes or description of prescribed securities. If you look at Schedule 3A now, you can only see shares at this moment. And the next amendment area is the amendments to the Companies Ordinance, clauses 20 to 50 of the bill, that is. This is to provide for the interpretation of new words and expressions, such as participating shares. Under the current Companies Ordinance, certain transfer and allotment transmission are required to be done with paper instruments, and then we are going to amend the relevant provisions to dispense with the need of paper share certificates and paper instruments of transfer. So this is about about clauses 21 to 34, and then of clauses 34 to 48 is to amend the provisions regarding to the register of members of company, so as to provide for the two-part system. In 2010, in the last amendment exercise, we already envisaged that in the future there will be a paperless system or uncertificated securities market system. But now we discovered that the past amendments might need to be refined. So we think it would be better to repeal earlier amendments to the Companies Ordinance, and then we will redraft new provisions. We need to, that is to say, we need to further amend the provisions, and that's why we propose repealing those earlier amendments. And there we need to also amend the stamp duty ordinance to come up to provide for a new stamping method where the transfer of shares are uncertificated or paperless in nature. That's all for my introduction and presentation, Mr. Chairman. So that's a presentation by the administration on the bill. The floor is now open for members to speak. Please raise your hand. We have sufficient time, so I don't want to impose a time limit at this point. Mr. Chan Kam Nam. Chairman, I welcome this bill because it would enable Hong Kong to keep up with the international securities market and their practices. This is more efficient. It's good for environmental protection. We don't need to print so many certificates in the future. But I'm concerned that the system will only be implemented in phases. And I know the market needs time to adjust. But in that paper, you didn't mention the target date. How long will the whole process take? And in the meantime, we're going to have a dual system, certificated alongside uncertificated systems. And you allow investors to go in and out from one system to another. Of course, you may provide some incentive, and you provide incentive in the transitional period. But if you allow people to go in and out from one to another system, this would undermine the adjustment process. Maybe you should set a time limit. In the initial phase, you allow people to go in and out. In the second phase, you allow people to go out but not into the old system again. And then in the third phase, it's all one way, and we all migrate to the new system. That may be better in terms of a clear message to the market. And have you assessed the impact on brokers? Because they do hold on to stacks of certificates on behalf of their clients, and the clients are so-called captive clients to them. And if it's become paperless, will the turnover of clients made easier, thereby affecting their competitive edge? Administration. Yes, let me briefly respond. And then, if necessary, we can ask SFC colleagues to supplement. On the question of timetable, of course, we would like to see it fully implemented as soon as practicable. We want to introduce the uncertificated system as soon as possible. But there are two major issues. First, the market and the investors, whether they are going to be able to adjust and adapt to the new system. The fact is that we have a lot of people using the old system. There are a lot of certificates of shares in circulation. We need to give our investors time to adjust and adapt to the new system. Second, we need to modify our system to tie in. In the initial stage, we would like to give everyone a little bit of time so that when the uncertificated system is launched, the operating system can be run very smoothly. We would use different means to encourage the introduction of an uncertificated system. As Mr. Chan Kam Nam has said, we can consider his suggestion, and we can also introduce phases in terms of coverage. For example, all listed companies will be required to maintain a dual system for a specific period of time. How long should that be? Well, we'll try to make sure that the entire transitional period will be over in a not too distant future. Second, we need to look at how new IPOs should operate under the system. After some time, there may be a requirement. We may introduce a requirement for all IPOs to be uncertificated. This is by way of promotion or encouragement, and it's actually more convenient for the IPOs, and we'll make suitable arrangements to tie in with their adoption of a certificated system. And after the initial stage, if the operation proves to be smooth, then we can decide how long the transition should last. As for the clients and the keeping of certificates and so on, I'll defer to SFC.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In future, investors can have a choice. They can register as members or shareholders of a company in their own names, so they don't have to have the Hong Kong CSS to be the nominee. Now, if an investor has daily transactions, selling and buying shares, if he does so frequently, maybe he can sort of leave it in the hands of a stockbroker, and then he can sort of be saved some trouble. But then for shares that he would like to hold on for a long period of time, maybe he would like to have the shares registered in his own name. In this way, this will be giving him a safeguard without jeopardizing his frequent transactions. The experience of the UK is that sometimes an investor may want a broker to hold the certificates on to hold the shares on their behalf. So in this uncertificated securities regime, we hope we can allow the investors to choose the most convenient form of holding the shares. Mr. Chen Kam Lam, of course, we would like to catch up with the international standards and would like to be on a par with the international practices. So I believe that we must put down a timetable so that we can have a target to work towards. As to the habits of the market, I think habits are developed over time. If you start to give a deadline saying that by a certain date the system will end as far as the paper-based system is concerned, then there will be motivation to get used to the new system. In the absence of a deadline, the market players will not be motivated to do so. So I hope you will do some promotional work here. Otherwise, the market would just think that it is something that is dispensable, and then they don't have the motivation to know the system. They are not familiar with it. It will be very difficult to implement it. In fact, there is a lot of international experience in this regard. In the future, there will be cross-boundary or cross-border trading, and then there will be an interface problem. As long as we have the dual system, there is the risk of market confusion, and then nobody will know what is the best way forward. So I believe that the administration should be more proactive. Now that we're introducing a piece of legislation, I think we should send out the positive message that is by a certain date we're going to launch it on a full scale. For the existing agents and brokers, as well as the investors, they need a new system, and they have to be connected with the stock exchange, etc. So I believe that you really need to impose a deadline. Anything else from the administration? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, member. I can't agree with you more. That is, if we have a timetable, to say that by a certain deadline we should introduce uncertificated securities regime across the board, then we should announce it and enable the investors to get used to it and enable the market players to be well prepared. Perhaps today we are not able to name a date, but then I believe that with the progress of time and with the development of our legislative work, we can always consider the imposition of a date. We are working on a number of fronts. First of all, now that we have introduced the bill for your scrutiny, we are also within the SFC and the FSTB are working on the subsidiary legislation. We are in the process of drafting the subsidiary legislation, which involves the operation of the system. And there are lots of details to be attended to, and it will take certain time. And we hope that by next year we'll be able to finish the drafting of the subsidiary legislation. And then we can submit the draft subsidiary legislation to the market for consultation, and then it will be subject to positive vetting by the Legislative Council. Once such work is in place, then we'll introduce the uncertificated securities regime ASAP. So much about the work schedule. As to the establishment of the system, we are doing it in parallel. In particular, we are working with the clearing company. We are also working with the agents. Well, in fact, there is a working group which is working on this matter. So as far as the establishment of the system is concerned, we are already conceiving the ideas. So a few things are being worked on at the same time, hoping that we can compress the time needed. Mr. Sin Chung Kai. I think we can't even catch up with the mainland, not to mention that we can overtake the UK or the US. So the mainland has outpaced Hong Kong by a number of years in this regard, so we should catch up. Now for Schedule 3A, it is said that there will be one item only, namely shares. Allow me to ask a naive question. There are many other products, so what are you going to do with them, like ETF and whatnot? So how are you going to classify them? Ms. Yan, I'll give a brief reply, and then maybe Ms. Mukadam can supplement. Now, currently, securities is a term that covers a lot of things. We have shares, we have debentures, and other products. Now, for Schedule 3, under the broad class of securities, we have got shares being singled out as a participating product. So Mr. Leung has said that for things like ETF, etc., they will not be covered at the moment, like warrants, etc. Once we would like to include them, then it means that the definition of participating securities will be amended. So when we talk about securities, we have 3A, and shares is the only item on the schedule on the list. One day, if we want to have debentures as well, then that has to be added to the definition. So you have only got shares. Why is it that you have got such a class here?
I can speak in English on this. Basically, the idea of the legislation is to remove whatever obstacles or limitations there are in the legislation that prohibit the use of, or rather that require the use of paper. And in terms of the legislation, there are three types of securities which have these restrictions. One is shares, one is debentures, and one is unit trusts. The provisions on shares and debentures both appear in the CO, the company's ordinance, and the provisions on unit trusts appear in the stamp duty ordinance. There are a number of other legislative amendments that are also needed to deal with the removal of
paper for these other securities. We didn't want the whole project to be held back by having to deal with these other set of amendments as well, and we wanted really to move forward at least with shares first, particularly because shares is something where, you know, it's, you have shareholders' rights, you have voting. It's something which is perhaps more familiar with the investors as well, as more immediate to them. And so that's why we thought, let's focus on shares first, get that done, and then we will come back and complete the picture with debentures and unit trusts.
我翻嚟另一個方法去。
If I may sort of share with you my observation, I try to look at it from another perspective. For shares, we have this convention. When I was young, I was holding to a certificate. I would go around. When I was a child, when I was of age, I mean, for unit trusts and other things, my concept is that they are less paper-based. So you're not working on those that are less paper-based, and you would rather opt for something which has a tradition of having a paper form. You talked about bonds, debentures, and now unit trusts. I think they are not so paper-based. We haven't got a legacy. We haven't got the history of having a paper-based form. Yes, we like to do away with the obstacles. Why are you not taking on those other two forms as well? Now, shares account for the majority of the securities, but then there are more and more products other than shares. Yes, Mr. Sin is right. We're getting more and more ETFs. Generally speaking, ETFs are quite paperless. Seldom people would take our unit, take it home, or holding a share certificate in their hands and go around. Usually they ask a bank or the agents to hold it for them. For bonds, we don't actually have a lot of transactions. Yes, a lot are listed, but then there is few trading activities. Now for shares, it involves more amendments to our law. So, as our colleague has said, we would like to focus our attention on the largest chunk, so that once that is done, the rest will be easier and quicker, and it won't affect the daily operation. For bonds, well, a lot of bonds are still OTC. Few have been traded in the exchange. I don't have the ability to say that I can't take your word. But then, to be frank, while you're working on it, why don't you cover the others as well? If you tell me that ETFs are difficult to work on, then I would accept it. But all of them are already paperless, so why are you not covering them as well? For shares, for decades, we have got elders who would like to have a paper form of the certificate. But if that's the answer you give, so be it. When we first started the task, we took everything into account. We looked at all the different classes of products, but then we found that if the other two are to be included as well, then the drafting work will involve a huge task. Yeah, the complexity will be so great that it will hold back the entire project. It will cause a lot of delay. So instead of going after the most ideal objective, we considered that perhaps we can do it by phases. We try to weigh the pros and cons, and we have had numerous meetings with the law draftsman. So after weighing the pros and cons, we believe that it is better to focus on the shares in this round of amendment. And in fact, the other products are also within sort of our consideration. But then, since it involves a lot of amendment, and in fact, they are already quite paperless. But then the amount of work involved is quite out of proportion, in particular for bonds, and also the implications on the company's ordinance.
It's going to be a mammoth exercise that requires a lot of tasks. We haven't given up that. We haven't given up the coverage of these other products. And since they are already paperless, we can leave it to the next stage. Other financial centers, and especially the mainland market, might have started with an uncertificated system, especially the mainland. They didn't have a legacy to contend with. And now we are going to introduce a Hong Kong Shanghai Share Connect. So we need to do something to make sure that we remain competitive. Well, the majority of members here would certainly agree that we go for an uncertificated system. The question is timing. I believe the administration must have referred to other jurisdictions, other markets, on how they go about this. Hong Kong is one of the 3 major centers in the world. So we should proceed with full speed because it's important for our financial development. And Mr. Chen Kellam has asked you a question about allowing the investors to go in and go out. I think you should make it clear that after 1 or 2 years, it's going to be one way. You enter the new system, you cannot go back to the old system. Well, if the investor doesn't want to do it, he can choose to have it done by the securities firm. You must give people the message that you are going to stick to a specific time frame. Say, if I hold shares myself, share certificates myself, it's easy. If I want to go paperless, I think it's easy for securities firms to migrate to this uncertificated system. It will take a year or so. So during the summer recess, you should think of ways and means to expedite the process. And a moment ago, Sin Chung Gai referred to Schedule 3A, and you only put shares there. I hope you would act quickly and do your best to cover other products. Of course, you may say that it would hold up this bill, but there are easier parts. Some products are not traded by the retail investors, but by banks and big security firms and so on and so forth. They welcome the change because they don't have to move paper certificates around. And also, they're not going to be charged the $5 stamp duty. It's easy for them. So let's do things in parallel. If someone says, I don't know how to do it, you can go to a bank, a security firm, and so on and so forth. But if you want to hold the share in your own name, well, you have to learn to do it paperless. You can also specify the different stages. In this stage, I'm going to cover this, and then a year afterwards, I'm going to cover these other products. You should let the market know in advance. You know, people are passive. If the time is not really pressing, they won't consider the matter immediately. So you should give people a time frame, what you hope to achieve, say, in 5 years' time. Deputy Secretary, thank you, Mr. Leung, for your question. Yes, we can certainly consider your proposal. That is, we send a clear message. We set the different timelines, time frames for converting to a uncertificated system. But we have to be careful. We have to make sure that the market can live with that, can tie in. But certainly this is on our agenda. We do have a plan to go for a paperless environment. But before we go that, we reach that stage, we may still provide for something such as no return to the old system once an option is made in favor of the uncertificated system. But in the first stage, we might have to allow people to move both ways. But I agree that the transition period should be as short as possible. And if people have already made a choice and opted for the uncertificated system, they should stick to it. We would certainly try different ways to shorten, to compress the transitional period. Well, in the coming few months, you should consider doing something like telling people that after a year, you can switch over to the new system, and then no one is allowed to return to the old system. It's better than presenting another piece of legislation subject to negative vetting here. You might as well set it out clearly at the very outset that it's going to be one way after a year. We are going to consult the relevant sectors in this exercise, and they will tell us what they think about this. And that would save you from the need to present something after 6 months to this council in charting our way forward. All right, other members? We have sufficient time. Well, if no other members want to speak, I think I have to use my time. This is my round. Well, I have to declare my interest. I'm a shareholder of a securities firm. I own a securities firm. I know this is the trend. The uncertificated system is the trend. It's even more convenient than the paper system from the perspective of a securities firm, and it's more efficient. The risk is lower. But for an investor, he may hold a share certificate. He keeps the certificate at home, and every time there's a dividend, the dividend is sent to his address at no charge to him. But if you go for an uncertificated system, there is a charge. Although the SFC wants the charge to be low, but we don't know yet what kind of charge will be levied. You know, there are retired people who rely on share dividends for a living. They will be concerned about the fees and charges in an uncertificated system. Second, it's a question of traditional concepts. People like to hold on to a paper certificate. Well, they joke that even if the value has gone to zero, it can be used as a wallpaper. I hope the fees and charges will not have a big impact on the system. If that's the case, I believe the trade will also support the move, the transition towards a paperless environment. But if you have a paper certificate, you can use it as a collateral for borrowings from a bank, for example. But what about a paperless system and a certificated system? Would a margin borrowing be affected by our switch to a paperless system? Thank you for your question, Chairman. The first one is about dividends and the fees and charges. Well, an investor can hold a certificate, hold the shares, and the dividends will be sent to him direct. If it's capped by the Hong Kong CSS, would there be a charge, and how much is it? That's the question that we are working on. We have a working group involving the registrars, share registrars, and Hong Kong CSS. Aspect of this so-called corporate action, and what kind of options should be made available to the investor and to security firms. What services should be provided by the Hong Kong CSS, or people may opt to do things on their own. In other words, the investor will just do what he has been doing all along. He can be sent a check, and at no cost if there's a dividend declared. In a uncertificated system, we hope we can come up with something similar so as to minimize the fees and charges levied on the investor. Well, if after the new system is established, can you make available the information on the shareholding for public inspection? Well, there will be registers for uncertificated or members register uncertificated shares. If the investor doesn't mind, then the name will appear in the register. And if he does mind, he can sort of hide behind a firm, securities firm, or an agent or broker. Well, if you do that, the shares are held in the name of the agent. Some people may not be comfortable about this. But if you hold the shares in your own name, for example, rich people may not want to do that. They may be concerned about disputes with family members, for example, in case of inheritance of estate. In the past, I just transfer the shares and the certificates will be in my name, and I just keep them at my home. So some investors have raised such concerns to me. But at the end of the day, what they really want is to keep the cost, the fees and charges low. Well, the details will be ironed out with the registrars and the Hong Kong CSS before we decide on the fees and charges. There's another question about margin or margin borrowing. We are talking to the Hong Kong SCC, and brokers and clients can certainly continue to do margin borrowing. So then it may be in the name of the bank or in some way the bank can control the movement of the shares, as long as the bank is sure that it exercises some control. We can discuss with the trade over the details to come up with suitable arrangements. We still have time. Mr. Chen Cam Lam. Chairman, with regard to your questions, and that is to say, the investors may have to disclose his name in the register. People may not want to have this made available to the the public. For example, people can just search under your name and know how many shares you own in a particular company. I think we should allow the investor a choice whether to have the name disclosed or not, or they can register in the name of a code or a particular name, because people may not want to have their access disclosed in such transparency. There's no requirement on shareholding to be declared or disclosed. I think we should allow the investor the choice.
If I may add a word here, in fact, brokers have had a discussion about this matter. For securities firms, if you don't show something to the clients are worried as to where the certificates have gone. And then if you haven't got a large enough custody for the certificates, then the clients are also worried as to the risk. Now, if you can show your clients that you are safekeeping a lot of certificates for the clients, then it must be a firm with a good amount of business, and vice versa. Otherwise, and if you have nothing physical to show to the client may be worried as to whether they are really still owning the shares. For the point made by Mr. Chen, well, I think it's a matter of the legal implications. The company's ordinance will say that once your name appears, then you are the legal owner. If you want to own the shares, but you don't want to have it to be exposed, then I think there is a contradiction here. We still allow the shares to be held by a nominee. You don't need to set up a company to hold the shares. And in this way, the name does not appear on the register. So I think it's up to the shareholders to make a choice. If you remember, when we consulted the public about the paperless system, we did talk about the options available to the investors as far as the central clearing is concerned. First, you open an individual's account, you are in full control, you have legal ownership. Second, the investor may choose to work through a broker to deal with the shares and securities. There's also an option, that is, you can use the service of a securities firm, but your name does appear on the register. And then another option is that you have the nominee arrangement. So back then, during the consultation exercise, we did say that there will be different options for the investors to choose from. The bill will not expressly provide for such a range of options. The actual operation can be seen when we introduce the subsidiary legislation. You'll get the details there. I'm sharing with you the general thinking, so investors do have a choice. Andrew Leung. For the company's ordinance, we have members register. You need to make it available for public inspection. So unless you use a nominee or other things, otherwise there is a name that can be looked up. When you have an electronic system, when you have a paperless system, it means that it will facilitate inspection. So under the company's ordinance, there's already a requirement to disclose the identity of the shareholders. irrespective of whether it is paper-based or not. So it is not because of such a change and then it will be facilitated or not, because it remains as a fact that we have got the CO and there's already such a requirement. Are there other questions? I haven't really got much to say. I think we can work on the details when we scrutinize the bill, because after all, this is the first meeting. Let me just repeat the same point here. I think we need to invite the public to express their views, though I don't expect too much controversy about the bill. So please arrange for a public hearing so that the stakeholders can come forward to express their views to us. Yes, if necessary, we can certainly arrange for a public hearing. Yes, maybe at the next meeting we can invite the deputations to come. Does any other member wish to speak? Mr. Chen Kam Lam, this is the first time that we look at this uncertificated securities market amendment. I think members of the public would like to know more about the operation in the future, in particular the retail investors. They want to know, once it is a paperless system, they want to know how trading, how transactions will be carried out. So I think it's necessary to give a briefing. Say, for example, in a scenario that this is implemented, then the investor has got an account with the Hong Kong SEC, and he has already left it with the Hong Kong SEC. It is paperless, and he has worked through a broker. If he wants to resell the shares, must he work through the same broker? If not, then the second broker may not know whether I really hold these shares. And how can this be verified? And how can we prove that we really own the shares? I'm sure members of the public will be asking the same questions. So what do you plan to do? Maybe such details are not set out in the bill, but they would of course be of interest to the members of the public. Mr. Chairman, why don't you come up with a PowerPoint, make it very clear, and then next time you come, you give a briefing. Now you try to do it verbally without any diagrams, without a PowerPoint. It will be difficult. Try to think through all the possibilities, in particular the concerns of Chen Kam Lam. So you all want to get a public hearing. So let's check our diaries. You want it to be done in September or October? And what about the admin? I think we need to tie in with the timetable of admin. Sorry, speaker is off mic. Beginning of October, early October. Would it be fine with you, Bureau? Our Secretariat can liaise with the Bureau. Early October or middle of October will be fine with us. Yes, we'll try to check out a date that is suitable. Are there any other items under AOB? No, then meeting adjourned. Thank you.